John, I'm so excited to have you on the show. And, I wanted to launch right in. You've said in books and interviews that marketing is the most important small business system. Tell me what you've observed in the early days of your career that brought you to that conclusion.
Well, I'll tell you what it really was. I actually was very influenced by Michael Gerber's work. I don't know if I'm sure some of your listeners are familiar with the E-Myth. And I so much, again, this was before I'd really started Duct Tape Marketing. I actually licensed and became a certified E-Myth consultant. And the E-Myth really kind of covers all areas of a business. And so I actually started consulting, using the E-Myth system with a lot of businesses. And I found out, that we couldn't pass go because their marketing was so broken. That was the one that was, was really the area that tripped them up. And I think the E-Myth was a great program, but marketing was probably the weakest part of that program, quite frankly. And some of the digital stuff was just starting to come on, and so that wasn't addressed at all. And so I really give Gerber's program a lot of credit for me starting Duct Tape Marketing, because what I realized was, yes, you could do, pretty much every element of a business, can be systemized. That was a big part of the E-Myth. But a lot of people couldn't see marketing that way. That was the one area that just was this very gray kind of area. And so that's really what I set out to do was to systemize or create a marketing systematic approach to marketing, where I could walk in and say, look, here's what I'm going to do. Here's what you're going to do. Here are the results we hope to get. And by the way, here's what it costs. And that, essentially trying to turn this service into a product was kind of the genesis of Duct Tape Marketing.
That's such a fantastic story. And I remember, I think it was in 2015, I was at one of those breaking points where I'm trying to do everything early on in my business. And I found the E-Myth book and I read it, and I'm like, it was just light bulb clicked, and it really helped me. But I took it, in the same way as what you're saying, more of just processes and getting in that technician, manager, entrepreneur type state, the mandatory, the needed, then the optional type of shifts in as an owner. A lot of the underpinning of what you do is these marketing systems at Duct Tape Marketing. So for our audience that isn't familiar, you could explain some of those tenets and the philosophies of that you have at Duct Tape Marketing.
For sure. So the idea of marketing as a system is probably the foundation of that is that strategy before tactics. So many business owners, and frankly, I think that's why this appealed to a lot of business owners. So many business owners are really struggling today to buy marketing services because it's gotten more complex. Everybody's selling a piece of the puzzle. Everybody's like, you need Facebook ads, you need SEO, whatever the flavor of the day, or frankly, whatever they're selling, is what the small business owner needed. And the idea that it wasn't all built around or chosen around the idea of, who's our ideal client, what's our offer that we can make to them, or a core message that's so compelling that we're going to stand out and differentiate ourselves. And that's really where we start. Now, some of the tactic things, certainly come into play, of course, but what tactics and how we approach the tactics, maybe what platforms we're even on, are really driven by this strategy first, the strategy foundation. And content has really, for us, become kind of the voice of strategy. Still, a lot of people look at it as a tactic that they have to do because that's what people do today. But it's really the greatest tool to guide the customer journey, built around a strategy. So, those just the idea of starting with a strategy and then integrating, all of these various tactics is kind of the approach that we have taken and kind of built my entire career.
I love that. There are so many channels popping up, whether it's TikTok or, Clubhouse, and you've got, YouTube Reels. It can be really enticing, those shiny objects just popping around everywhere. But if you just try to, I love Grant Cardone. I'm a big Grant Cardone, 10X, outworking everyone. But if the strategy's not there, you can really just tread water and just not get anywhere.
Yeah, and the problem with some of those folks that are preaching that stuff is they really are kind of dragging people into the next big thing that that maybe they can master, that works for them, But the thing that I see that for anybody that follows anybody that calls himself a guru is what they do works for them, and it's probably not going to work for you in the same way, and might not even make sense for you. And so you really got to figure out your own, who you're trying to serve, how, who can you provide the most value to, and build really all of your marketing around that, or attracting those folks, and not, I mean, if you want to be the next influencer on, Clubhouse, God bless you, but it's probably not, the path for most.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we've had a lot of guests on here that have been successful with different marketing channels, whether it's an Alexander Shinara. We haven't had Alex on the show, but he's killed it with billboards. And we had individuals that have done great with TV or SEO or Facebook. So yeah, there's just a lot of different approaches if you get that strategy right and it's for you. Kind of shifting, there's one thing that you talk about that's a bit different, and I think it's just so intriguing. Yeah, you've developed this paradigm of the marketing hourglass as opposed to the marketing funnel. Could you walk us through what the marketing hourglass is and how it's a bit different from the traditional funnel?
Yeah, so for us, it's really the customer journey, and I called it the marketing hourglass before it became kind of cool to talk about the customer journey, which is something that this every marketer talks about today. But what I saw was everybody out there pitching this idea of the funnel. The shape, funnels down. You get as many people up there at the top, and eventually a few of them will funnel down and turn into clients. And to me, what I always thought was, when I got a client, I want to serve them so well that I grow with them. I don't want to have to just go out and get more, because I wasn't selling a $29 product, right? I was selling a service that I hope to have clients for life. And so to me, I wondered, how could I build intentionality into that idea? And so instead of creating demand, I think what we try to do is organize behavior around 7 stages, and those stages are know, like, trust, try, buy, repeat, and refer. And so the hourglass metaphor is really just acknowledges that you take the funnel, and then once somebody goes through the funnel, it kind of expands back out again. And that's really the approach that we've always taken, is that our job is to start with the belief that 100% of our clients are going to turn into raving fans. And so if that's the point of view we start with, what do we have to do? Excuse me. What do we have to do 45 days after they become a client, 90 days after they become a client? What it does is it forces us to really focus as much energy on the customer experience as it does on getting the click or getting the email.
Yeah, and I think that's critical. I've worked with a lot of personal injury firms, and they concentrate on getting that lead, but then it's like, the experience may not be as good, and then they have a more difficult time getting those reviews. And being an SEO expert, you understand how important those reviews are, and it just makes sense.
Well, and just because you and I have talked before, I mean, I think that your industry, the SEO particularly industry, has a bit of a bad reputation for smoke and mirrors and like, what did I really buy? I mean, I can't tell you how many business owners I talk to that have no idea what they bought.
Right.
They pay somebody X amount a month. And so, firms like yours, and I know that you do this, that actually create a great experience, that actually teach and educate on the results that they're getting and communicate. I mean, it's just such a great way to differentiate.
Well, thank you for that, John. I appreciate it. Pivoting a little bit, I wanted to talk a little bit about podcasting. You've been in the game since 2007. What drew you to podcasting in the first place, and what's kept you at it for almost 15 years?
Well, so, it was one of those things where I had been blogging for a few years and really saw the advantage of kind of getting on that early. It just was to me, I'd already been producing content. I'd been, writing articles for article directories and things. Blogging came around. It was just like, oh, here's a better place to put my content anyway. Podcasting felt like a bit like the same thing. It was kind of new. It was early on, but it also just felt to me like another way to produce content. But the thing about it that was so intriguing to me is that I was able to get just about anybody I wanted to come on my show. And so it was like, Seth Godin was an early, most of your listeners, I'm sure, at least have some knowledge of who he is. And he was one of the earliest guests on my show. Had I sent him an email and said, "Hey, I'd love to pick your brain for 20 minutes," he probably wouldn't even have replied. But when I said, "Hey, I'd like to talk about your new book on my show," next thing I know, Seth Godin's a good friend, and he's writing a blurb for my first book. And so I just saw it as a great way to get to have conversations with people I wanted to have conversations with. Now, I've been doing it a long time, so it's grown and turned into a revenue stream for us and a great, marketing component. But I would still do it today because of the conversations that I get to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a way to give value and, get your foot in the door. What other advantages do podcasts have over, maybe other marketing channels? I know you touched on a few of them, but just your overall thoughts there.
Well, I think if one thing it is, let's face it, it's content. So that's the starting point, but it's content that can be cut up into little pieces. It's content that can be transcribed. And so it can be a different format of content. You and I are doing this today with video cameras on. So all of a sudden we've got another form or format. So that's one of the things. But I think that particularly the pure audio component of it, it's probably the most portable content because somebody can listen to it in their car, they can walk the dog, they can be on the treadmill, and they're consuming your content. So from a just pure content play, I think that's that adds a lot of value. But there are also some people, I know when I write a book, if the audiobook version doesn't come out on the same day, I instantly hear from people because it's a format that there are people that's the only way they consume content. So those are some of the advantages of having it from just a pure content standpoint. But also, regardless of the kind of business. Now, I'm a marketer and I interview authors who typically and quite often are in marketing, space on my show. I had you on my show. So for me, it's a great way for me to get, external content that I'm not, I can bring the best of the best at any specific thing. And now I own that content and I have that content on my site, and people come to my site and they go, "Oh, wow, this is your top 10 guests, on your show." So it certainly has the ability to elevate your authority, create great content, create content that's, it's very shareable and very portable. But also I think, gives you kind of the ability to offer some expertise. And I'll take that down to maybe a much different level. You could be that local consultant who works with CEOs of, manufacturing firms in your city. Well, going out and inviting the CEOs of those firms who, let's face it, are actually prospects to be interviewed on your show is a tremendous way to get sort of a backdoor sales conversation, or at least a, "Hey, here's who we are" conversation, while at the same time serving them and producing great content for yourself. So there's just so many benefits to podcasting.
Yeah, and with the domain authority that your site has, I imagine that any article that you upload to it stands a significant, a great chance to rank because your site's got over 10,000 referring domains and just a ton of authority.
Yeah, there's no question that comes with a lot of time and a lot of effort that we've put into it. But there's no question, a link from our site, when I have somebody on, to the person that's been my guest, a link. We link to their ebook, we link to whatever their course, whatever they tell us, that is valuable. Those links have tremendous value, and obviously, I know your audience is a lot of SEO folks, and they get the idea that backlinks are a big part of always probably will be, but still certainly today are a big part of the SEO puzzle. And that's another, for the guest, that's a tremendous benefit in many cases. Is today I think it's one of the best ways to get really potent, useful backlinks is to be guests on podcasts.
I 100% agree. And you really made this transition easy for me, John, talking about the importance of backlinks. And I like to think of podcast interviews as like creating that gap too. anyone can go use a tool, Moz, Ahrefs, SEMrush, to go see what backlinks you have, your competitors have, and go do a directory or guest post. But you have to have a relationship to some degree to jump on someone's podcast. There has to be a little bit of trust there. So I wanted to talk specifically. You're the co-founder of Podcast Bookers. I think it's an amazing service. And for our audience that doesn't know what it is, tell us a little bit about Podcast Bookers.
Well, sure. So we realized the value of of backlinks, of getting people on podcasts, and I think there's a bit of a gap. There's probably more podcasts out there than there are guests on podcasts in some cases, and so realizing there was a little bit of a gap, what we started Podcast Bookers to do was to get the attorney, the remodeling contractor, the people that weren't thinking about, oh, I need to be on podcasts, to book them on podcasts and get them to start seeing the value of once a week or 2 times a month or something being on somebody's podcast, and then over time building their expertise, giving them a library of audio content that they can start referencing, and let's face it, getting great backlinks back to their sites as well. And so basically what we do is somebody comes to us, they say, here's who I am, here's what I want to talk about, and we get them on shows. I mean, that's the simple thing. They can buy 2, 3, 5 a month, whatever they want to do. But we also follow up, we get them booked, we help them get the material that they can put out there so that they can get on shows or show that they are indeed an expert, and help them develop their topics that they want to talk about and things. But somebody goes out and does that for a few months. First off, they get good at it, which helps. They get more comfortable with it. But the thing that a lot of people have been doing, like guest posting and things like that for a long time. It's a lot of work to write, theoretically exclusive content, then go out and find somebody who wants it. And then let's face it, a lot of sites anymore that accept guest posts, I mean, it's on there with the 10 others that they got that day, and it's just kind of buried. Right. And who knows if it'll ever see the light of day. But on a podcast, that host who does that show, is very intent on getting ears on that show. They're going to promote that show. They're going to promote that you were on that. There typically will be social posts that go along with your appearance. And so not only do you get this great backlink, not only do you get this great content, you're probably going to get audience at a far greater level than you would on, say, a guest blog post.
I absolutely love everything about that. And, I think a lot of, and I know you know this yourself, working with your clients, that your clients they want to help the agency do whatever they can, whatever it takes to make this a success. And you get that question a lot, what else could we be doing? And I love it when we have a client that's willing to do podcasts. We had one of our, actually a couple of our clients use your service, and it's just a way to activate them to help with the link building tactics. And like you said, if you guest post, who knows if that'll be promoted on social media, who knows when it will even be crawled.
Yeah.
And I just love, there's just so many aspects of podcasting, and, promoting a book, promoting your own podcast. I just love everything about it.
Yeah, it's you're absolutely right. From an SEO provider standpoint, it's sort of the sneaky little trick, right? Your client is now actually they're building backlinks for you, so you don't have to go off to some site in Belarus and just buy them, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's the truth. Right. And again, it's different. It's not everyone wants to go do a podcast. So you do those competitive analysis. You got some people that have those links from podcasts and others that don't.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for anybody that's in professional services of any type, it's a no-brainer, because professional service sale, hiring an attorney, hiring an accountant is so involved. The trust is such a big factor in that. And so the fact that you are on these shows, somebody else saw you as an expert, I think that goes into the trust building box. But I tell you, increasingly, I don't think there's a business out there that can't benefit from it. Obviously, it's more potent for some, but it certainly has, I think, in terms of relative time spent, it has benefits really for anybody. I don't care what industry you're in.
Absolutely. And we've talked a little bit about podcast bookers and the benefits there, and duct tape marketing and everything you do there. Tell us a little bit about how you are certifying and developing marketers.
Well, so when I started this approach that I talked about, this systematic approach, I called it duct tape marketing because I felt like it needed a brand name. I built a full practice, but I didn't really want to build an agency per se with all the in-house staff. And so I documented it. I started selling kind of a course, if you will, called Duct Tape Marketing, and I started attracting other independent marketing consultants and agencies that were experiencing the same thing I had. They wanted to work with small business owners, but it's kind of frustrating. So they wanted to kind of use my methodology, and so I started a network. It's called the Duct Tape Marketing Consultant Network. We've got about 150 today, independent agencies around the world that license our material, get all of our training, get certified, but ultimately collaborate with each other. About 75% of the folks in our network are solopreneurs, and so anybody who's doing it, because we can now, you can build a nice business all by yourself
Right.
today. But it can be a little lonely out there to not have anybody to really collaborate with, or to even bounce ideas off of, or get best practices from. So people join our network really for all the tools and processes that we've built, but they stick around because it's just a great, it's great having that community and that network.
Absolutely. And I want to talk about you as an overachiever now, because you're not on your first book here. You're on your seventh, I believe. So you've got an upcoming book. Tell us a little bit about the upcoming book.
Sure. So it is my seventh book. It's called The Ultimate Marketing Engine, and it really does kind of, in some ways, it's my marketing system idea, but certainly evolved for it's going to come out in September of 2021. One of the things that I signed the contract for this book like a week before the first lockdowns started in 2020 during the pandemic, and I didn't want to write a how to market in a pandemic kind of book. But one of the things that became really clear to me during this period that we all went through was that I had a lot of clients, some of really not by any fault of being in the wrong industry at the wrong time, got wiped out. But I also saw a lot of businesses that were able to adjust and hang in there, and actually even are thriving now. And the key thing that it's always been true, but it was just so highlighted during that period was, in really good times, I mean, businesses can profit just by being in the right industry. But in tough times, businesses prosper because they mean something to their customers. And that, I think, we all saw. There were businesses that people wanted to stay in business, that went out of their way to keep in business, or to rally around the community. And so this book, The Ultimate Marketing Engine, is really presents this idea of looking at our customers as members. And I don't mean membership model, subscription model. I mean, those are great models, but talking about even a service business, that rather than looking at them as, okay, here's what I provide, here's what you said you wanted to buy, here it is. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what if you actually looked at it and said, look, here's where you are today, but here's where you want to go. How can we get you there? And so instead of just saying, here's what we sell, you create, the book really outlines something I call the customer success track, where you're able to analyze the stage that every one of your customers is in, the characteristics of that stage, the challenges of that stage, and the promise of maybe moving to the next stage, with the idea that, I'm sure you see this, most of our marketing clients come in what we call foundational stage. Their website's kind of a wreck. They really have just been iffy on content. They're not sure what's going on in SEO. So we've got to build that foundation, but we ultimately want to take them to the point where they're now their website's generating not just leads, but conversions. That we want to take them to the level where now they're adding more products and services. So essentially, the plan is to evolve them, to mature them, not just to fix what it is and generate more leads. So ultimately, you get to the point where you are growing with your customers as opposed to going out and finding new customers. So it ultimately leads to this idea that you're receiving most of your business by virtue of the fact that you have happy customers. But it really starts with, now I get into a lot of tactical elements of that, but it really starts with a point of view that your job is not to just serve the customer, it's to help them mature and help them go to where they want to go.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I think, a lot of sales conversations, they probably start out with, here are your issues.
Right.
And I think what I'm hearing is it needs to be like more, where do you want to go type
Right.
of conversations.
Well, it is. And one of the things that, it gets rather involved, but one of the attributes of that is once you kind of map that out, then you can actually say, okay, if they're in this stage, what are the milestones that they need to achieve in order to go to the next stage? And the reason I love that is because milestones are typically yes or no. Did you do this? Did you not do this? So instead of something like, is their website, effective? That might be something somebody might ask. Well, I don't know. How do you answer that? But does it load effectively on a mobile device? Yes or no? Okay, well, then we can move on to the next thing. So each of our stages has, in some cases, hundreds of milestones. And so it's not just a matter of identifying these and just because it sounds nice to say from where you are to where you want to go. But
Right.
we're actually systemize that to, 100 little yes or no questions. And of course, obviously tasks that go along with those questions. So you literally can create an entire blueprint that answers that. Okay, well, here's how you get to where you want to go. And I think that when I started really embracing this thinking and this point of view, it really changed how we looked at our customers. It changed certainly how we serve them, but it also changed the conversations we're having with them. We're having much deeper conversations in the beginning, rather than to responding to what we think their problem is.
I love that. And then you can find synergies and kind of just there's complete alignment in regards to the goals. So really excited about that book coming out. And, I've listened to other interviews you've done and you read more than most individuals. I would say, I've heard you read 50 to 100 plus books every single year. So I generally don't ask this question, and I'm sure you've been asking a ton, but, what are some of the books that you recommend, particularly on the business or marketing side?
So full disclosure, part of the reason I read so many books is I do over 100 interviews with authors. And so I may not read them cover to cover, but I constantly am reading, because I read so many books in marketing and business, I'm constantly looking for inspiration in other areas. I find that some of my greatest innovations come from reading books about architecture or nature or science or math, as opposed to just sticking in the little bubble of books that we all all have a tendency to read.
Right.
So I will say that if I gave you a list of all the books that I read last year, you'd find some seemingly strange ones on there. But I guess it's because I get sort of force fed so many of the current marketing books. I'm always out there looking for topics that seem interesting to me. I'll tell you the one that I'm just finishing up is the mythology of wolves in literature throughout history.
Yeah, that's a different one.
So what's so interesting to me, I'll give you the 2-second version of that book. We all know Red Riding Hood and the Big Bad Wolf, and the wolf has been really demonized as an animal, but as a mythological character throughout literature. And it's really done a lot to, and again, I won't get on my soapbox here, but it's done a lot to really, people want to kill wolves. People are afraid of wolves, and I think there's wolves are, part of the ecosystem. And so it's just, to me, I'm not even reading it as a social statement by any means, but it's just fascinating to me. But it also, I mean, it gives me, there are ideas that I put in this next book that came out of this idea of the ecosystem and returning wolves to Yellowstone, for example, and what that did actually to create a more healthy ecosystem, because I think businesses are a lot like ecosystems, frankly. And if
Yeah.
one part's out of alignment, if one apex, predator is not present, then, things fall apart. I just think there's so many things in other parts of life that have a lot to teach us about business.
Yeah, I think that's incredible. And I think that's a valuable piece of advice. And John, this has been so wonderful speaking with you, and you have such a wealth of knowledge. I just loved having you on the show. Where can individuals go to learn more about you and your companies?
Well, you bet. Well, I appreciate that, Chris, and I've enjoyed my time here as well. The easiest place, I mean, I'm on all the social networks as Duct Tape Marketing, but if you just want to drop by ducttapemarketing.com, which is DUCTTAPE, marketing.com, you can find my podcast there, find my books there. I've got, like everybody, I got free stuff there that you can subscribe to. So check it out.
Wonderful. John, thanks so much for coming on the show.
You bet, Chris.